I don't think this is a southern or northern or eastern or western tradition. But back when I was growing up in North Carolina, on Sunday, it was a very sacred day. It was a day of rest. It was a family day. It was a day to go to church and do little else. There were no ball games. There were no department stores open. Walmart wasn't even open back then. They closed on Sunday back in the 50s. I don't think they existed then, but if they had, I'm sure he would have closed on Sunday. But anyway, nothing was open on Sunday. Maybe a gas station every so often, but no restaurants, no shopping centers, no department stores. There were no YMCA ball games or anything like that. It was to be truly a day of rest, a day of family, a day of worship, a day to rest. Well, we always used to get up early on Sunday morning. My dad did not believe that church could be held at any other time other than 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why, but we always went to the early service. And after the early service, we would usually drive from Durham north about 30 miles to a little town called Roxboro. Roxboro is where Ginger is from, my wife, and my family, my mother's side of the family, they lived in Roxboro. So we would go and visit my grandmother, and because we went to the early service and left right after church, we got to Roxboro in time to go to my grandmother's Methodist worship service. So my parents were really kind to us kids. They took us to church twice on Sunday. And we would go and we would sing the Methodist songs, and the windows would be open, and the fans would be going. And you know the Methodists are like the Lutherans. They really can sing. They really sing out those good old gospel songs. And we would hear a Methodist preacher give a good old sermon about one thing or another. And then after the church was over, we'd go back to my grandmother's house and have a lovely lunch. The relatives would be there, the cousins, my mom's brother and sister would be there. It would be just a wonderful, wonderful family day. And I expect those were the traditions that you had as well, probably in your hometowns too. And then about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my uncle would often ask us if we would like to come over to their house for dinner. And that would be great because the cousins were all about my age, and we would play and have a good time and just enjoy the day. My father and my uncle always sat on the back porch. And I didn't know until later why they sat on the back porch. Well, my uncle always kept in the refrigerator about 3 or 4 Budweisers. And my grandmother didn't think that her son or her son-in-law ever imbibed. So my uncle had a refrigerator on the back porch, and he'd go out there, and behind the Coca-Colas, he'd pull out a couple of Budweisers. And they would hide them behind their hands and sit on the back porch and drink those little Budweisers together and enjoy some good conversation. Well, we would go in and we would have hamburgers on the grill or something and cook. And then the kids had to go outside. We were not allowed to cross the threshold of that back door from 5:30 to 6:30. And the reason was my uncle loved that wrestling. Did you ever see that on TV? The wrestling? Early service watches that stuff. You didn't. And my uncle would watch those wrestlers, and my father and my uncle would argue all the time because my dad kept telling my uncle that's not real. And my uncle would get mad because he said it was real. They really fall like that. And so they'd go back and forth. That they didn't want any kids in the house, and they didn't want any talking because my uncle didn't want to have his wrestling matches interrupted. So while they were watching wrestling, I know you're not interested in this, but that's too bad I'm preaching. My cousins and I would be in the backyard playing. But about 7 o'clock, we would sit on those same back stoops because there was a Pentecostal church right next to my uncle's house. And at 7 o'clock, they would have a worship service. The windows would be open, and you would not believe the preaching that would be going on in that Pentecostal church. That preacher for a solid hour would be raising holy hell with his members. He would be telling them they're not worth 2 cents. If they don't straighten up, they're going straight to hell. And what scared us the most was he would say in the middle of almost every sermon he gave, and if alcohol ever crosses your lips, you will never cross over into the kingdom of heaven. And we would look at each other and think our dads are not going to make it. I couldn't believe the fire and brimstone that would come out of that preacher's mouth. Everything we Lutherans did, do, or won't have ever done has been wrong. And what I couldn't believe most of all is that the church was full. Why would those people come back week after week and subject themselves to that kind of vindictive and angry God? And I'm thinking, well, if you listen to the prophets in the Old Testament, sound just like them. The title of my sermon today is, Are You Thirsty? Yes, we are thirsty. We have been in the Old Testament now for several weeks. We are thirsty for a kinder and gentler God. Listen to Isaiah in the 1st chapter. I am sick of your sacrifices. Don't bring me any more burnt offerings. I don't want the fat from your rams or other animals. I don't want to see the blood from your offerings of bulls and rams and goats. Why do you keep parading through my courts with your worthless sacrifices? The incense you bring to me is a stench to my nostrils. Gosh, he's angry. But today in Isaiah chapter 55, he has changed his tone. And we are thirsty to hear words from this less angry God. God says through the prophet Isaiah, is anyone thirsty? Yes, Lord, we are thirsty. We are thirsty for the word of hope. We are thirsty for the word of forgiveness. We are thirsty for your words of encouragement. We are thirsty for your promise of salvation. Come and drink. Even if you have no money, come. Take your choice of wine or milk. It's all free. And then where briars grew, myrtles will now sprout up. This miracle will bring great honor to the Lord's name. It will be an everlasting sign of his power and his love. Now, all the things that Isaiah and the prophets said about and from God were important. God gave us the 10 Commandments because he wanted us to have a better life. If you think about what the 10 Commandments are, if we all follow those 10 Commandments, our lives would be better, and indeed better. Also, when he fusses at the Israelites for not coming to church, he's letting them know that church is a place where I bless you. You need to be here for your own good. And his comments about not treating the people right out in the world, that's true. As people of God, whether we're in the Old Testament or the New Testament, we're called to spread God's love and kindness and justice with all people. So what has changed? Tone has changed. And I like the tone of God in Isaiah chapter 55 better than the tone of God in Isaiah chapter 1. It's about tone, isn't it? This week in my home, I made a terrible and dangerous mistake. I had the audacity and the gumption, the gall and the nerve to leave a candle burning in my bathroom. In the mornings when I take my shower, I light a candle that I get from Texas. I order them a special, and they smell like bluebonnets. Have you ever smelled bluebonnets? There's nothing better, Don, than to take a shower with the smell of bluebonnets in the air. I do. I order those candles from Comfort, Texas. If you ever want to get a candle that smells great and will burn forever, let me know. I'll direct you to the website. But anyway, I had the audacity and the nerve to leave that candle burning. Well, Ginger had left before I did that morning, and she was over at the church at a Bible study. And during the afternoon, when I was sitting in my office doing the Lord's work, helping people find Jesus, I get a phone call. It sounds like my wife, but the sermon coming through that telephone sounds like a Pentecostal preacher. She said, "Did you know that you left your candle in your bathroom burning the whole day?" She said, "Do you realize that it could have caught fire and burned down our house and everything in it?" I said, "Ginger, watch the tone." I said, "Don't you remember last Sunday when I said that anger is the lowest form of human communication?" I said, "The next time I make a mistake, which is rare, I want you to call me and address me this way: 'Sweet darling, it is not good for us to let a candle burn all day long. So together, let us work to make sure that when we leave the house, all candles are extinguished, sweetie.'" I will not tell you what she said after that comment. But don't you agree? It's about the tone. Jesus, even in the New Testament, when we're saved by grace alone, tells us to do things that would make our lives better, that would benefit the kingdom here and the kingdom to come. But look at the tone that Jesus uses. It's a tone of love. It's a tone of support, a tone of encouragement, a tone of hope, and a tone of promise. And so when we think about the Christmas that is to come, this Christmas we're about to celebrate, we thank God for not changing the Ten Commandments, not changing His expectations of us for discipleship, but for changing His tone. Let us stand.